At some point, the practice stops feeling like freedom and starts feeling like homework. You sit, you observe, you catch yourself reacting, and you pause. You notice the thought before you follow it. You've read the books, you understand the teachings, you know what the masters are pointing at, and still something doesn't close. There's a gap between everything you understand and the way you actually live. Between the clarity you touch sometimes in quiet moments and the person who shows up when things get difficult, you've been trying to close that gap for years. What if the practice was never supposed to close it? This is the second video in a series I decided to make differently. Just my own perspective after years of sitting with these questions and the mistakes I made along the way. One question that came from that first video stayed with me. Are we doing something wrong? Is there a right way? Or are we simply waiting, hoping that one day awareness will arrive like an unexpected guest? It's not asking which practice works better or which teacher explains it more clearly. It's asking something more uncomfortable than that. It's asking whether the whole premise is off. And I think it is. The practice doesn't always look like sitting with your eyes closed. Sometimes it's the self-monitoring, that constant background process running underneath everything. Am I reacting right now? Is this the ego? Am I present enough? A commentary on your own experience that never quite stops. Sometimes it's waiting for the right state, or collecting evidence of progress. Teachers you've sat with, moments of clarity held onto because they prove you're moving somewhere, and the anxiety when too much time passes without a new one. The forms vary, the feeling underneath them doesn't. That you are here, and what you're looking for is somewhere else, and that the right practice, done consistently enough, will eventually close the distance. That feeling is what I want to look at today. That question I mentioned stayed with me because of what it wasn't asking. It wasn't asking for a better technique. It wasn't coming from someone who had given up. It came from someone who had watched hundreds of videos, meditated, understood non-duality, could explain the difference between ego and awareness, and still felt like something was missing. That's not a sign of failure. It's what happens when someone has been sincere long enough to notice that sincerity alone is not closing the gap. And what I find worth saying about that is this: the gap doesn't exist because they haven't practiced enough. It exists because the practice is built on a premise that creates the gap in the first place. Every time you sit down to practice presence, you are quietly confirming that you are not present yet. Every time you observe your thoughts to get closer to awareness, you are quietly confirming that you are not awareness yet. The practice points towards something, and in pointing, places it at a distance. That's the silent cruelty of it. Nisargadatta said something I kept returning to for a long time before it landed. He said you cannot practice what you already are. You can practice patience. You can practice kindness. You can practice attention. These are qualities that develop over time through repetition and effort. Consciousness is not a quality. It doesn't develop. It doesn't improve with consistency. It was just as present on the day you had your worst moment of distraction as it is right now. Listening to these words in whatever quiet you've found. The awareness registering these words right now is the same awareness that was there before you found these teachings. Before the first book, before you ever heard the word non-duality, it was always here, always complete. So what has all the practice actually been doing? Something real, but different from what you thought. The practice has not been building a path toward consciousness. It has been slowly loosening the grip of the belief that you were ever separate from it. Years of sitting, of observing, of returning attention to what is here. That does something. But what it does is remove obstacles. It doesn't construct a bridge to somewhere you weren't. You don't practice seeing. You remove what was covering the eyes. Those moments of clarity you touched in quiet sessions were not glimpses of something new. They were glimpses of what was already the case, with the noise temporarily quiet enough to notice. The clarity was always there. The practice didn't produce it. It just stopped producing the interference long enough for you to recognize what had never left. That recognition changes everything about why you practice, and it changes everything about what you expect from it. The gap you've been trying to close with effort, the distance between understanding and living, that gap is a sign that you've been asking the practice to do something it was never designed to do. You've been asking it to take you somewhere you already are. Consciousness was never hard to reach. The reaching was the problem. I want to be careful here, because this is the part that sounds like another instruction. Surrender, and it will come. Stop efforting, and everything opens up. These are just the same practice, wearing different clothes. The ego picking up the teaching about letting go and turning it into the next thing to achieve. What I'm pointing at is something quieter than that. The awareness you've been trying to reach through practice is the same awareness that has been watching you practice. Sit with that for a moment. It was there in the sessions that felt like progress, and in the sessions that felt like failure. It was there on the days something opened up, and on the days you felt like you'd lost everything you thought you'd understood. It didn't wait for you to get it right. It was never conditional on your effort. And here is what changes. When that recognition lands, even briefly, even partially, the exhaustion softens. The premise underneath it dissolves. You were tired because you believed you were running a race with no finish line. When you see that the finish line was a concept you were carrying, the running stops feeling like obligation. The practice, if it continues, changes quality entirely. There's a difference between doing it because you haven't arrived yet and doing it because it's simply what this moment calls for. The first is driven by lack. The second comes from something closer to rest. And that rest starts to bleed into ordinary life, into the difficult conversations and the mornings that don't feel spacious or clear, and the moments when the mind is loud and the gap feels as wide as ever. The gap doesn't disappear, but you stop being convinced that the gap means something is wrong, because you start to notice that the thing aware of the gap, the thing that knows the noise is loud, the thing that recognizes the difficulty without being destroyed by it, that thing was always watching, complete, unchanged by everything passing through it. The gap was never the whole story. The next time you close your eyes, trying to feel something, the next time you catch yourself asking whether you're reacting from ego or from presence, the next time you open a meditation app out of guilt, the next time a difficult conversation leaves you thinking you should be further along by now, just notice what's underneath all of that. The quiet assumption that you are here and consciousness is somewhere you still need to get to. Then ask yourself one thing. Who has been aware of all of this? Sit with that, because that question, if you let it, points somewhere none of those efforts ever reached. It points at what was never searching. This is the second of 3 videos I'm making from my own perspective. If something in this landed for you, tell me in the comments. And if you're carrying a version of this exhaustion that you want me to explore in a different way, I'd love to read it.